everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Humans in the Loop. I'm Marty.
And I'm Pete. How's it going, Marty?
It's going really well. So today we're going to continue to push on this theme of what we call humans in the loop. And we're going to talk about where we see that's needed, or in some cases, absolutely necessary in this world of AI, and why. And as usual, Pete and I are going to give real world practical examples. So, as usual, there's a lot going on with the implementation of AI tools in the enterprise. It's a phenomenal amount of innovation going on every day. What are you seeing, Pete?
Oh, I just, kind of reflecting back on our last podcast when we had that kind of, off-camera interaction where we're like, AGI, what is AGI? And I realized that, I think artificial intelligence has this branding problem, which is, it's called artificial. And nothing artificial is really, really good. Artificial sweeteners cause cancer. Artificial meat is ultra-processed. Artificial coloring in food is banned in half the world. And so I think, why is this the future of kind of human decision making? Why is that labeled artificial? So I'm not a marketeer, but maybe there should be a different name for this. Maybe real intelligence, maybe RGI. Maybe that's what people want, something they can trust. But I think that gets to the point of our conversation, right? Is that you can't really trust this thing at this point fully unless you have a human in the loop. And so I think that kind of plays into this dialogue that we're having today.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. I mean, think about it. Silicon Valley always has its expressions, right? Which in many ways don't really connote the right theme or the right illusion. So, good example would be like social networking, right? I mean, is that really social? Are we really networking when we use that? The other one, given, you and I went through the mobile phone. Is it always mobile? I mean, do I use it like a phone? Or is it really more like an electronic portal to basically everything I do? So I think, artificial intelligence, I agree with you. It sounds a little cheap, or maybe a little scary. I did, in this past week or so, Sam Altman put out a blog that got a lot of press. And basically he was trying to show that AI and everything going on is actually somewhat human, and not really that's scary. So that came out. I don't know whether I agree with that or not, but that was kind of the tenor of that blog. But at the same time, in the last couple of weeks, some Apple researchers put out a white paper that actually showed that this stuff is really not that intelligent either, right? That it, at a certain point, the intelligence kind of collapses. So I think, but if you step back, both of those, the Altman white paper, the Apple white paper, they sort of highlight the need for a human in the loop, right? And I don't think we're going to be able to completely bypass humans in this process. So what do you think about that? I mean, I guess, can we be a little more analytical about the way that we answer that really important question?
No, so I've been thinking about this. I was reading last week about how some CEOs and Reid Hoffman and others have their own AI clones that are actually, doing work for them. And so I got to thinking about, how much work these clones can actually do. How much autonomy do they have? Are they making real decisions? That sort of thing. And so I thought about digging into that a little bit more and thinking about it in two ways. One, looking at business processes, like take a list of business processes and understand how much AI can do and how much AI can do with autonomy in those processes. So that's kind of one way of looking at it, which I think is pretty straightforward. The other more maybe controversial way is looking at it from a role perspective, like a VP role, VP of sales, VP of finance. And what degree can AI automate those jobs, and what does that mean for the future of management teams? And I think that's a little more controversial, but pretty interesting to look into. And so I actually did some research on AI to help me understand this. And basically, here's a snapshot of some business processes that happen daily in a company, and the extent to which AI has determined that AI can automate them. And so if we look at some of these, things like scheduling meetings, 95% autonomy, marketing emails, 90% autonomy, invoice data extraction, 90%, customer support, 80%, internal status reports, 80%. So it goes down. Exit interviews, 50%. It points out that it's lacking emotional nuance, right? And down to vendor payments, 30% because you have this fraud risk, right? And so there's a whole continuum of autonomy here. And, I think, what we know is that AI is amazing at pattern recognition. It's very quick. It's very structured. But when it comes to people, when it comes to nuance, when it comes to judgment, that's where a human comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting research. And actually, when you look at those percentages, they're in general pretty high, right? So AI definitely having a material impact. And yeah, I agree. It feels like the human's needed when you look at each one of those processes. But I think one way that I'm thinking about it is the human input is getting pushed further out in the process. And so what I mean by that, like, for example, in the case of marketing, instead of, a human back in the day, pre-AI, you're building a strategy for the marketing campaign. You're then going to create the content. Let's say that it's all about lead generation. And so what's the strategy? Who are we going after? We got to build the right content, and so forth. And I think here now, AI can do a lot of that, right? And can actually come up with more options and more ways to go about, achieving the goal. So it feels like the human, at the end of that, you've got all these options. Now you still need to filter it. You still need to review those final options, and you need to select them and then say, go. But that human input is kind of later in the process. I think another more obvious case that gets a lot of press is, it used to be a software engineer codes from line one, right? And they're coding line one, line two, line three. Let's say they're building a Python application or what have you. And now it's like, no, you're creating prompts. It made me think about when I hired engineers, we would actually bring engineers in, final candidates, and ask them to code live on something and show us what you can actually do. That doesn't really make a lot of sense, or not as much sense now. Now it'd be like, okay, I want to see your prompt engineering, right? So you're actually asking the tool to do the actual coding, but how do you prompt? How do you get a good answer? So I guess my point being that the human in the loop it's almost becoming more like, I don't want to call it quality control, but it's almost like QA later in the process, where you're selecting and you're sort of managing the tool and selecting the right option, and then kind of giving the green light to go ahead and go into production. What do you think about that? I mean, it just feels like we're still very, very important, very involved, but now coming into play at different parts of these processes that you just highlighted above.
It's clear that AI is having a significant impact on these enterprise processes. We hear about fewer entry-level people being hired due to AI across all kinds of industries. But I thought, we could step back and look at these executive roles a little bit more deeply. Yep. And how close can AI get to actually running, a full executive role? So again, I did some research, and I asked AI to kind of specifically investigate every task of various executive roles, VP of Finance, VP of Sales, and then make a determination on how much efficiency or automation could be had. And I think it's really interesting. I'll put up this slide, and you'll see it shows that efficiency gains can happen over three phases: kind of quick wins, 0 to 6 months; moderate integration, 6 to 18 months; and then advanced, 18 to 36 months. And I think this will be highly debated. But look at these numbers. They seem very reasonable to me, if not conservative. So you got a VP of Finance that can be 53% more efficient over time. Okay, VP of Supply Chain or Ops, 40% more efficient. Engineering, 36% more efficient. VP of Sales, 33% more efficient, and CEO, 28% more efficient. Right. So those are like kind of heady numbers. So what does this mean? I think in addition to just being more efficient at the entry level, we're going to be more efficient at the executive level. And kind of maybe, as you think this through in a couple of years, we're going to see these young kind of native superstar AI VP of Sales and Marketing, VP of Product, and engineering, VP of finance and HR. And I ran finance, HR operations early in my career. And I think the 53%, looks reasonable. But I think of this as a CEO and think if you could now run your company and not have a team of 7 executives that you have to coordinate and align and manage between, but 3 or 4 super AI powered executives, that to run the team and do all these different things. And the amount of complexity and communication and interaction that you would have to have is much more constrained and aligned. So I don't think this is about AI replacing leaders. I think it's about augmenting them, but I think it could have dramatic impacts on how management teams are kind of organized and managed in the future.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no, that's super interesting data. And I think there's no doubt, and we're already starting to see it, where what I would call productivity expectations, whether that's coming from Wall Street or it's coming from boards or CEOs, the productivity expectations are going to dramatically increase and just become table stakes, right? Especially as we get into the rest of this year, 26, 27, you're going to have to be more productive as an executive, as a company, and you're really going to have no option, right? And we see that with every major trend, cloud, mobile, the expectations around productivity go up. But in what you're showing, these statistics they're huge, right? Even if they're within the range of okay, maybe it's a little high or low, but I think it's the answer is it's significant. But I had a related thought to this, which is I think so when we think about the human input on that productivity graph, it's really this, what I call this critical filtering that a human does across all the processes and roles, right? And it's kind of what I referred to above. It's almost like QA, but you're sort of, that filtering that you do as a human, whether I'm filtering, I see a mistake, I'm going to fix a mistake, or I'm picking the best of 100 options that AI gave me, whatever it is, but that becomes even more critical. And therefore that human input becomes even more valuable, right? So people are scared about, humans are taking the back seat and we're getting pushed into the, into the back. And it's like, well, I think our role gets inserted at different points of the process, but it's incredibly important and incredibly valuable. And so companies are going to have to find that sweet spot, sort of the combination around where do I insert the human, where's the most valuable and most important part of that. And the companies that figure out that mixture between human AI and where's the right balance between those are going to be the winners. Another way to think about this is the real, quote unquote, the human input or review that becomes increasingly valuable over what I would call the unreal, right, over time. And maybe the way to think about it is there's less, quote, volume of what we traditionally do as humans in our functions and our roles, but where we insert becomes even more valuable. So I think this balance between using the tools that we're highlighting here and the human input is going to become really important. The press likes to pick up on extremes. So for example, you see this, like there's going to be an AI only company, no CEO, just an AI, building a company, getting money. Okay, it's interesting, probably unrealistic, but there'll be a lot of press around that. There'll also be the 180 from that, which is, I'll call it Luddite Incorporated, that says we're not going to use any AI. We don't trust AI. We're not going to use any. But they're just going to get their ass kicked on the productivity level, right? So that's not realistic. So it's going to be somewhere. It's going to be a combination, and somewhere in the beginning. I was thinking of Amazon. Everybody said Amazon was going to, destroy jobs all over the place. Well, they leveraged e-commerce, they leveraged the web, and I think they have over 1 million employees. So it's not like, there's a lot of jobs that are associated with that, just a simple example.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think you're spot on. I think that the interesting thing that I see as I talk to a bunch of companies is the surprising lack of engagement with AI, understanding of how AI can make their jobs, more productive. And I think conceptually everybody says, oh, this is pretty cool. And everybody's using it to write emails or, kind of get different degrees of efficiency. But I would say it's, the 5-10%, more efficient, not like really kind of rethinking the job. And I think part of it is people are so enmeshed in the way they do their job today and busy that you can't get out of your own way to kind of start a new process with AI and kind of, kind of think about it from first principles. But I think what everybody has to do is they have to come up with a practical use case. Think of some example, some business process that you have, and maybe go back to our list I'll put it up again that we shared earlier. Think of a business process that you can take and try to fully automate it to the best of your ability with AI. Obviously, some human interaction, right? But not, but see what you can do. Because what I think is, and this is what I see personally, is unless I have an actual application, an actual task that I'm trying to do, and it's big enough, you're not really going to get it. You really got to try hard to solve a specific problem with AI and see what it can do, and really, take it to the nth degree there.
Yeah. Let me maybe I can give a practical use case that I think everybody can do right now and get a lot of value out of. And you showed it on the list. So I think, look, every single company out there, small, big, medium, private, public, wants better leads. Everybody wants leads, right? And these tools are phenomenal at quickly identifying, let's say you have a target segment, you have a target buyer, maybe you have a target geography, whatever you're focused on. You can ask the tool to identify prospects, companies within a very specific set of guidelines, right? So maybe it's the size of the company that you're interested in, or maybe it's the stage that the company's at, or what have you. You can provide all that information and get a list of the companies. By the way, I've done this, and the list of companies is really high quality, and it's going to include some companies that maybe you didn't think of, right? In addition to that, you can ask it for up-to-date contact information by function. Let's say that you're trying to sell to the head of operations, just to pick a title. You want who's currently in that role, fresh contact information. You want to know exactly who that person is, how to communicate with them, some recent information about them. Maybe they had some social posts or something that gives you a little bit of insight or some advantage into reaching out. It will pull all of that together. When I say it might be something like Manus AI, ChatGPT. One of these tools they literally can do this. And they do this in, let's say that by the end of that, it's 20 minutes. If you know what you're going after, maybe it's a half an hour, something like that. So this is like really, really useful. And then as we get into agentic AI, it can actually help you craft, actually reach out and start doing that for you, right? So I think to me, that's like a really practical example of doing that, getting some new leads, getting some fresh business coming in by leveraging these tools.
Yeah. And I thought of one other thing that, everybody's having that problem, like, what, I don't know how to do a prompt, or, this prompt engineering thing that everybody talks about being so hard. Ask the AI to give you a prompt. So go to one AI, go to ChatGPT and say, give me a prompt for this problem that I'm trying to solve, and work with it a little bit. And then go to the Manus or whatever you're doing and put that prompt in there, and you'll see how it works, right? I think you got to be, more creative about how you're going at this, not just kind of keep hitting it with a hammer.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I think your example is a great one. And I think that that's probably a great way, if you're a CEO, that's probably a great way to start, right? You go to each of your functional execs and say, hey, you take one process, this month or, this quarter, and you implement an AI, and we're going to report as a team back, how much more efficient we get, right? Really kind of drive it down and kind of force it. Just like some companies are saying, hey, 50% of your code has to be generated by AI, right? It's that same kind of process at the executive level.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great practical test where, by function, everybody pick one process, grab one of the major AI tools, see what kind of value, what kind of answer you can get. And I think in some cases, like maybe the example I just gave, it's going to be really useful. And maybe in other cases, you're like, not yet, but you're learning and you're starting to inculcate the use of AI tools in the culture of your company and so forth. Okay.
Well, I think that's probably a good dropping off point with some practical advice for folks. And so we'll wrap it at that. If anyone's interested in connecting with us, engaging with New Prism, reach us at podcast@newprism.ai. And we'll leave it there today, Marty.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Okay, see ya.